The Gospel that we have read can be misconstrued to defend something which is actually not in the Lord's mind at all. E.g., we might hear this comment. The Lord takes here the passage with regard to David, how he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests. The people may take this to plead a case. Look how the Lord himself juggles with these rules. Hence we can do the same, notably in the question of the bread of the presence, of which this is only a type and a figure. With regard to this very day I happened to come across some interesting passages which made me reflect on the gravity of the issue and of the cleverness of the one who hates the Blessed Sacrament par excellence, the Lord's own enemy, Satan, who therefore hates his body and anything that protects it. And I came across this passage in Mariasimma. She, in this book, which you will know well, Get Us Out of Here, has quite a lot of discussion of all that Satan is doing with regard to the attack on the Lord's body. And this particular one, in conjunction with something I heard just the other day, made me reflect. What I had heard the other day was something which I wasn't aware of, that Father Owen Gorman, whom you know or know about, is the one who did that program on EWTN last year, which I was involved in. He, in Clonus, where he is priest, has actually, even though they have removed way before him the altar rails, insisted, and without opposition actually, because the people have great faith in that parish, to having kneelers brought in at Holy Communion and to having everyone receive Holy Communion kneeling, and I think also on the tongue. And because he has educated them without any fuss, bother or violence, they have gently got into mode and appreciated that this is a holy man who is not in any way making a noise, but just quietly adoring God with love and sincerity, and the people have come on board. Interesting that it's not always a case of violence or polarity of opinion, but authenticity recognized and followed through. But this comes through in Mariasimma. It was the case of a person who had died that had in his family, in his offspring, a priest. So I just quote this here. In another case that comes to mind right now, a soul told me to tell his son, a priest who lives just across the valley down there, to put back his communion railing. So first I took the instruction to an acquaintance of his, but he said, "Oh, you tell him yourself. He'll believe you more than he'll believe me." So I did that and wrote to him. But until today the man has not followed the advice. I believe the priest is a good man, but he's simply afraid to act upon it. So it is in that context that I happen to collocate those two in one bracket, that Father Owen Gorman was not afraid and he was pleasantly surprised. And I found actually in this hermitage, everyone except perhaps one or two elderly people who might drop in, kneel instinctively, knowing that that is the atmosphere of the celebration, and there's never ever been given on the hand in this hermitage. People just naturally get into mode. So it's not always a question of either awe or aggression. a question of knowing delicately how to show what's involved, and if you wish you can do the same, and everyone actually gets into mode because they're all into prayer. That's the problem, being into prayer or not the outworking of that in itself. Now, one or two other things in this caught my eye today also. It's another issue which comes to my attention quite a lot, because a hermit in Ireland cannot but be involved with a high proportion of young people, because, say what you like, the faith is still there, and young people have the same sort of problems, love relationships. And therefore, not just being a priest, but being a listener comes into it. They're actually glad sometimes to offload, so it's neutral territory. But anyway, this comes through in some shape or form very often, because young people between the age of 15 and 35, a lot of their energy is going into this realm, getting their act together. So, how important this question of with whom to get one's act together comes into it, and it all stands or falls on this. It's the one thing that brings down young people in their Christian life more than anything else, relationships. It messes up their own because they don't get the right person, at least first time. Now, to show how important it is, this actually comes through. The question by the sister who's doing the interview comes out like this: can you give me an example of how a poor soul freed or protected someone, that is from the other side? Yes, but it was another form of it. Now listen to this. It's against the question of somebody who's related through marriage, through being on the bloodline. A young man was looking for a good and holy wife. He had a woman in mind and visited her on occasion. Yet every time that he went to her house, there was a man off to the side somewhere who called over to him, "Don't go there. You will not be happy with her." The first few times he ignored it and went on. But then, the third or fourth time, he stopped and took a closer look at this man. It was his own father, who had died many years before. He then certainly paid attention and went hunting elsewhere. So here he was freed and protected from many future troubles. Hence the importance for any young person to invoke not only the Holy Spirit, but another thing that actually works very well is to get one's own guardian angel, to get in touch with the guardian angel of the person that one is fishing for, to ask that they consult amongst themselves, and if it is the will of God, they give the two angels together some sign. Try it, it works. Now, a third one, and that's the last. With regard to these holy souls, and by the way, when we're celebrating the sacred mysteries, even if it's not specifically for that intention, we know from Padre Pio that there's a whole crowd around pulling at the priest's chasuble. Don't forget me, don't forget me, don't forget me, don't forget me, tug, tug, tug. So that's what we're at the altar. There's a whole world in this place, not only the angels, big time, but all these holy souls as well. Now, are you sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. 2 years ago, a sister went on a speaking tour in France with Vichka, one of the Medjugorje visionaries. Of course, the trip was fast and hectic, and as they went, the sister found herself carrying a flight bag with a lot of money in it. This money had been collected to pay for the rent of the rooms where Vichka was scheduled to speak. They often shared the same bedroom, and early one morning, just minutes before they had to dash off to the next meeting, the bag was not to be found. Sister knew precisely where it had been the day before, but of course could not delay their departure because many thousands of people were waiting to see and hear Vishka, and so off they went without it. Before leaving, though, she asked the landlady to turn the room upside down, and then, if need be, the entire house, because it was a lot of money, and it was nowhere in the house. It was already owed this sum and they had to get it. So, Vishka then continued on her way to Germany, and the sister travelled back to Medjugorje, still very desperate about the loss. Understandably, she felt very responsible. Now, upon arriving in Medjugorje, she called out to the poor souls, "Find that bag for us, and I will give you a novena of masses." Only 3 days later, a letter arrived in Medjugorje, and it was from the landlady of the house in France where they had slept that night. It said, "Just now we found the bag, and all the funds are in it, with nothing missing. It was at the very spot that you told us you had seen it the day before you left." Comment. This does not surprise me in the slightest. A novena of masses certainly takes many souls up into heaven. I found out about this only when that sister visited me and left the question for me to ask a poor soul. That's how she got to know about it, to see what had actually happened on the other side. Did a poor soul return the lost bag of money during the Vishka trip to France? That was the question. And she herself, Maria Simba, had this. A month or so later, I was given the answer, yes. Now, is it possible that the bag one evening, so to say, floated on its own back to that very spot? That's the question the sister is asking her now. And she answers, with God, everything is possible. But I would think that the poor souls chattered into the subconscious of the thief to return the bag. And it was this pressure on his conscience which is formed within our subconscious mind that the good thief found intolerable. But did he re-enter the house secretly to return it exactly to where he had found it? That is quite mysterious, I must admit. Or did he have free access to the house anyway? In other words, somebody was actually on the scene. No matter what, the poor souls received 9 masses from the sister, and they will never neglect to pray and to act for her. So I could tell you 1 or 2 other stories about how one barters with a holy soul. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus,